Yes, Dolph Santorine. Welcome, buddy.
Bob, good to be here.
Entrepreneur, businessman, big success in the valley, right?
Something like that.
Something like
Of course, I was just sticking my tongue out on live television just a minute ago, but that's okay
That's
too.
okay. That's okay. Big question to begin with is what are the biggest hurdle you think an entrepreneur will run into when they decide to go into business?
Having been through this, a lot of times entrepreneurs have a great idea and they may or may not have a product, and the first thing they do is they go out and they start looking for money. And they've got a number of different places to end up looking for money, what I like to call F&F, which is really friends and family. And then there's a number of different steps of venture capital, for lack of a better term, and it includes things like unicorns, and then you can find maybe an angel investor, and at some point in time there's some mix in there with maybe you can end up doing a bank depending on what kind of business you're in. But I think probably the biggest hurdle is the money.
Getting the money.
The money.
That makes sense. Now, I've heard that the failure rate is pretty high with people starting businesses. Is it really above 2/3 of them failing?
Oh yeah, so
Really?
it's yeah, when and I'm no longer active, but for a while we were very active in financing startups, and we had obviously a very narrow focus because that's what we were expert at, and every time we went outside of that narrow focus and that expertise, we got our butts kicked. But that's just the way it works. But I would joke about if I was having a good year, I had a Babe Ruth kind of batting average, which was about a 300, so out of 10 deals, if we did 10 deals, 3 would be a success, and the other 7 would end up being euthanized. And I guess that's a nice word for put out of business.
Put out of business.
And the way they were put out of business, and a lot of people who ended up coming into this, no matter how many times I told them, it's like, okay, you've committed to these milestones, and you're going to hit those milestones, and then I'll write additional checks. And then as you continue to succeed, I'll bring in other investors so that your company is fully funded. But when they didn't hit those results, it's like, you committed to do this. And then I ended up with all the stories about, well, this didn't happen and that didn't happen. And it's like, I'm sorry, that's not my problem. And, as an investor, and that's one of the areas of controversy, I guess, or discord between an investor and the entrepreneur. There's a set time frame and there's expectations, and if those expectations are not met, then additional money doesn't come out and continue to come into the project. But it still looks the same way. A good year, and 3 out of 10 are successful. The other 7 end up being euthanized. A great year is 4 out of 10. So yeah, it's less than 2/3.
So the people who borrow the money, they really need somebody to oversee what's going on and make sure they meet their goals, or they're not going to continue to see more money, pretty much.
Hindsight's always 20/20, and I'd be happy to tell you about some of my failures. And basically 3.5, almost 4 years of completely active investing, doing a lot of deals, and euthanizing, not making it. The successes were just so sweet, but they also had to be rich enough to carry the 7 that, you do 10 deals, and the 3 that are successful have to be so successful that they end up paying for the other 7.
Cover for the losses.
And I think a lot of would-be entrepreneurs don't realize that. I'm going to tell you about a couple of deals in a global sense that I didn't do, because I think there's some important lessons there. I was asked to end up meeting with a would-be entrepreneur, and this goes back almost 7 or 8 years ago now. And I thought he had an interesting product, but he was so fixated on wanting to have all the equipment. Oh no, I can't sub that out. And there were companies that could end up building his whole product and do it probably as efficiently as he could. And instead, he was absolutely convinced that he needed $1.8 million for all this production equipment, and that was that. Well, he went out and he raised about 1.5, and he went into production, and instead of putting the money into what the product really needed, which was sales and marketing, he put it into the production equipment. And fairly rapidly, $1.8 million went away, and all of his investors, not me, but all of his investors ended up taking it on the chin. So, it's really a matter of proving your idea and proving that your idea can end up performing. If once you end up having a positive track record and an increase in sales, revenue, taking care of those pesky customers, then you
Yeah.
can end up raising, then you can end up raising the rest of the money. I mean,
Yeah.
the money will come. It's just that you need to end up considering it that way.
Okay, so when it comes to the money, you have your options are your friends and family,
Oh yeah.
unicorns,
Hmm.
right? Angels,
Expensive money.
angels,
Expensive money.
and venture capitalists.
Expensive money.
Expensive money.
All of it's
So,
expensive money. But friends and family are probably the friendliest point. And I've even seen people in real estate end up taking a bath. So, friends and family need to say pretty much look at their checkbook and look at who's sitting on the other side of the table and decide how much they can afford to lose. And if you can't afford to lose it, don't write the check. Don't get involved. But friends and family are also have how most businesses start, and it doesn't matter if you're starting on grandpa's garage. But in those early times, you need to be just so focused on that capital because it's just not there. I mean, I've talked to entrepreneurs who ended up saying, "Oh, I'm going to pay myself $10,000 in the month in the beginning," and it's kind of like, not on my money here, not. I mean, expect to starve, expect to get paid less, last.
yeah.
I mean, and I'll tell you, I'm about ready to end up probably violating one of my own key rules with a family member who wants to go into business in the valley and end up bringing my second oldest daughter back into the community. And I'm so excited about it, I can't see straight.
Oh,
But this is the kind of thing where I don't want to run his business.
right.
I need him to run it. But he also ends up needing to understand those constraints on the front side. You're probably going to get paid last. All right?
Yeah.
And everything else, because everything else is going to be taken care of, in the beginning. And the people that you have talking to your customers are the most important people in the world
Yeah.
because they make and break your company and they set the tone for what you do. And I've been lucky enough in my past to be blessed with unbelievably great people on the front line. We were quite a motley crew, but boy, did we sound great on the phone. And when you think about it,
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
the most part, that's all that matters. Because my customers rarely ended up seeing our staff, and we had an unbelievable staff, completely customer focused in the way it should be. And I think that that's so important. And I think that some entrepreneurs end up realizing that. But a lot of entrepreneurs haven't had the opportunity to work for a truly great boss.
Yeah.
And I think that's transformative in so many different ways.
I would imagine. And we get back to the money.
Always.
It looks like the money really wants a lot of the business to jump in.
Oh, sure. We're back to that example, So I do 10 deals. 7 of them don't make it. 3 do. I end up needing to pulling a piece back. One of the things I think that's become more common, especially with people who look like angel investors, which is primarily what I ended up doing, was basically you come in for more than 51% of the company as an investor, so that you've got a lot more control over, especially over things like the checkbook, so that you don't end up with an entrepreneur who goes off the rails. And then you give the entrepreneur an earn back, so he can end up getting some of that capital back. But expect the money to take, in the beginning, a huge percentage of the company, and at the end, you may end up with only 30% of the total company. And if that's not to your liking, I mean, if you're doing, a local retail or a local specialty operation, can you end up living on, that 30%? If the answer is no, don't do it. If the answer is yes, then maybe you've got something. Or maybe you need a different series of financing. Or maybe you need to wait 10 years until you have more equity in your home, and then you're betting the ranch. And a lot of entrepreneurs, especially the people who make it, they're all in. I mean, they're all in financially. They're in with their retirement. They're in with the equity in their home. They're driving lousy cars. They're doing all that stuff in order to get their idea launched. But yeah, outside money, angels, venture capital are going to come in for a huge percent. It's expensive money.
Yeah, well, it is. What about the biggest mistakes you think that an entrepreneur makes?
You don't always need to own the cow. If you can get the milk, you're just fine. And I think that's the biggest one, especially in the beginning. You may end up sacrificing margins when you're in the ramp up, okay? And I think that that's one of the problems. I think the second biggest problem is not getting outside expertise. I'll never forget when my wife and I were in the manufacturing business. I had outside money come in, and he sat down and he looked at us and he said, okay, you're a sales guy and you're engineering the product. Yes. And your wife's a lab tech and she's the accountant. Well, yes. And he pretty much left and never came back. But, you know, there's certain expertise that you have to, you know, if you're blazing new territories, it's okay for the sales guy to be the engineer. Okay?
Yeah.
But on a lot of those other things that you need, either sub it out or align yourself with really great people who can end up doing that. You know, you're going to need, especially as the business grows, you're going to need somebody on the fiscal side of the house that can keep the reports coming out while the CEO founder is out selling or writing code or any combination thereof.
Yeah.
But you're going to need those key services, and they're going to have to be, you know, they're going to have to be all in just like you are. So, you know, again, that's another place to spread some equity around.
That's good. What about writing down your plan and following it? How important is a plan?
No, it's critical. You absolutely have to have a great plan. It must be in writing. And not only must it be in writing, but you need to be able to present it and communicate it effectively. I mean, I can think of hundreds of PowerPoint presentations that I ended up doing, pitching my ideas over the years. And I've seen a lot from other people. You know, there needs to be a piece that is clear and concise, and then there needs to be a piece that goes into, you know, painful detail, because you're going to get asked for those questions. Okay? The other thing is, don't spend a lot of money with accountants on financial projections. You can do your own. There's a lot of places to end up reading on that, because we're not looking for a CPA. You know, most of your investors are not looking for CPA quality projections. What they want is reasonable projections and some idea of where the business goes. Once you end up getting them involved, then they're going to bring in their people and they're going to take another look at your numbers, and there's going to be there'll be a reasonable set of numbers that come out of that exercise. But you don't want to end up having a CPA do your financial projections. It's just money that's not well spent.
Now, that makes sense. What would you say if you were going to give somebody that you really liked and you wanted to see them successful?
Okay.
What would you recommend to that person?
I think it's all in. Just plan on spending ridiculous amounts of time. You know, do whatever you need to configure your life so that it works, and expect that it's going to impact your family at some level. I mean, when my kids were little, I mean, the way we got around it is the office was right next door to our house. So, I mean, I put my head on the pillow 70 feet from where I put my butt in the chair in front of my desk. Yeah. And I think that was really important. That made it work for us. Had it been, you know, if I was a 10-minute drive away, it would have had a negative impact on my family. But you need to end up planning for that. You need to plan to be all in. You need to plan on doing whatever it takes in order to make that business a success. And you can't do three other things. You need to focus.
You got to stay focused.
You got to stay focused. The other thing is you need to stay with it. You know, I see a lot of people who end up going in, they invest a year, they get the friends and family money, which is the right way to start. And after a year, they're starting to head in the right direction. They just haven't turned the corner yet. And what they do is they throw their hands up in the air and they shutter it, and they just, well, I didn't make it. And, you know, whatever the reason is.
Yeah, that's I guess that's just life and the learning experience, right?
Oh yeah, and it's like anything else. If it's easy, everybody would do it.
That's right. Well, Dolph Santorine, thank you so much for coming in and explaining this to us.
I enjoy sharing. This is fun.
We'll have to do it again.
And I appreciate what you're doing, and I appreciate what Jim and ESV is doing. This is, I think, a great thing, and I really think in a lot of cases it will be the future of television.
Let's hope so. Thank you very much, and we'll be back again. Take care.